just as Booker T. Washington says, cast down your buckets where you are, the operative is cast down your bucket. And so, what we intend to do is that wherever we are, we intend to create an environment that is independent, that is controlled by us, and that is uplifting and reconnects us to the past before being kidnapped. And so we're not hindered by statements like, you don't own this, or you don't own. No, there are people who own things that don't control them. And there are people who control things that they don't own. But our task is wherever we are. Control means to influence who is in the space that you live in and what goes on in the space that you live in. That doesn't require a title or a deed. That wherever we are, it is our ability and it is our responsibility to control those spaces that we live in. Not to segregate ourselves, but to build an environment for independence and self-sufficiency. And so as we work to do those things, and as we look at those individuals that have come before us, who've given us some pretty good examples, they produced a floor for us to stand on. The ceiling that we see in Dr. Washington or Marcus Garvey or the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, their ceiling is our floor. So do Brother Chris, Sister Gwen, any comments?
I actually went to one of the schools that Brother Muhammad mentioned, Sister Claire Muhammad School in Atlanta, Georgia. And the exposure that I had in that school actually got me to the position I'm in now, helping to teach people about who they are, the confidence, the lack of fear, just the overall love for my people. And it was very, very, it was instilled at a high level at a young age. And it definitely makes a difference. So I would highly suggest, no matter what the religious background or the religious teachings people have, the amount of discipline that I received at Sister Claire Muhammad School was life changing, and it still influences me to this day. I just wanted to share that. But good job tonight, everyone. I learned a lot.
Thank you, sir.
Brother Ned?
Yes.
Yes, sir. This has been eye-opening and informative. The fact that you put this group of men, this group of leaders together is very significant even in our day, because my father was born in near Sandersville in Wrightsville, Georgia, in 1901. And my father was a W.E.B. Du Bois man, because there was always that little controversy about who was right, Booker T. Washington or W.E.B. Du Bois. And as I've gotten older and experienced a few things, I realized that they were both right. It was a both and situation, because as we learned about Booker T. Washington, yes, he was a kingmaker. He had connections, he had smarts and money, and he knew at that particular point in time, Black people were getting lynched like crazy. And his way of tamping things down came in the form of what they call the Atlanta Compromise, when he made that speech. But he was trying his best, I believe. And what I read of his history, he was trying to save Black folks, because he could see that they had gone completely mad. Ida B. Wells, everyone was fighting. A man was lynched today, a woman was lynched today. It was. We can't imagine it now, but if we put ourselves in their shoes, where every time you turned around, a Black person was getting murdered. And because he was in that inner circle, he was trying, I believe he really was trying to make a pitch to bring it to a stop, to bring it to an end. I read somewhere in his biography that when he would read about those things, he would be extremely upset, but he could not show that in the public world. But in his private world, all those things, they just tore him up inside. And he had his way of dealing with it. Of course, the Atlanta Compromise was, if you read the history of it, you know, it was a big issue for Black people. And many Black people kind of castigated him for that. But looking at the things that he did do, I think he felt like he had to do something to bring it to a halt. And I believe that was his way of doing it. He's a complex character. He's complicated. But definitely worth studying, worth understanding, and really seeing the man, Booker T. Washington, not so much the imagery that was put out there, but the man himself and how he felt. And
Thank you. Thank you. So again, we would like to thank everyone for joining in, for sharing, and we are beginning to see clearly that we have to be more than YouTube historians, that we have to study. If we're going to use our talents and the purpose that has been placed in us to its fullest potential, then it requires that we study. And we must go beyond the narratives and the platforms that the enemy of African people have put up to contain us. All right, so I think what we can talk about in the next week or two is where do we want to take this conversation in terms of these three men and the work that they did. One of the things I'm impressed about them is that in terms of Elijah Muhammad, he's 37. In 1931 or 32, he's 37. Marcus Garvey is 33. You know, the times that we talk about this, he was 33. Booker T. Washington was 25. I'm just impressed with that. Here's a per 25 years old. And not only does he not stumble through this great challenge, but you see him 14 years later, this guy is like on a national and international stage. 14 years later, this guy from 1881 to 1895, he becomes the Black man in America that if you want to know something, you need to talk to him. And so I must be impressed by not just by the age of these men, but their capacity to build in the midst of the challenges. That's what I'm locked on to, that they were builders, that they were organizers when seemingly all around them, it would militate against them doing what they did. And so we can also see that in today, say coming up to today, if we look at men like John Bertrand Aristide, if we look at Louis Farrakhan, There are a number of people that we look at even today that are messengers that, I mean, I don't know how many attempts on the life of John Bertrand has. I mean, this is a guy who's been, do you know, Brother Koiku, how many times people have attempted to kill him?
Don't
I don't know.
I
But
don't,
it's
but
a
it
number of times that people have attempted to kill Aristide. And still, all the things that they do, when this man returned to Haiti, the people turned out in thousands. And I was listening recently, the people were saying, well, I'll sacrifice my life. And so what is it that these men are saying? What is the message that allows us to move beyond religion, not move beyond, but to understand that all religion has a cultural foundation? All religion. You can't separate religion from culture. That's why we're trapped in white culture, because we think that religion is somehow disconnected from culture. Yeah, religion is how people agree. How do we agree that we're supposed to relate to each other? What are the rituals and beliefs that we have that allow us to relate to each other and relate to the environment around us? And you find that in every culture, and it's connected to the culture. And so I'm impressed with this. I'm impressed with the capacity of these men, and not just these men, but the people, the thousands of people who work with them to build these organizations. We're able to recognize that, absorb it, and build on it. They're not by themselves. If you know the history, even of Savannah where we live, go to First African Baptist Church. The building that exists now on Franklin Square, that building was built by people who were enslaved. If you go into the basement, they have the original bricks. And if you turn the brick over, there's the handprint of the people, the Africans who made that church. They made it. They worked all day, and then by torchlight, by moonlight, they built that church. Because they believed that if you build a house for God, God will build a house for you. If you acknowledge God, then God will move for your liberation. And what it showed me, Brother Kweku, was that when that church was built, it had a membership of over 2,000 people. So that means that at least once a week, 2,000 mostly enslaved African people was coming to that church, to that building, to that space. And under that building, there was a 4-foot space under that building. And that was a space that was used to spirit African people away from those plantations to the dock to Savannah River, where they could get on a boat and escape being sold or escape being beaten. And what is impressive to me is that they put the lie to, you can't do anything like that because people will tell. Nobody told. They did it for years. Nobody told. And it was thousands of people there. So I don't know how they did it, but they did it. And so the people that built that building, there was an original first African. But when the building, I guess when the people outgrew the building and they knew they needed to build these escape routes, Reverend Marshall, who was the pastor at the time, he gave them a challenge. And the problem they had is that many of these people had spent decades saving money to buy their freedom. And he presented them with a dilemma. If you put this money into building this edifice, all this money that you have saved, your pennies, your nickels, your dimes, you're working every day in these fields and in these houses, and you worked on the weekends and you did whatever you could do to amass enough money to buy your freedom. He gave them a dilemma. You can purchase your freedom, or you can pull together and build something so that anybody that needs to be free can be free. And those men and women, just like us, decided we'll sacrifice our personal, individual dreams and goals. We're going to put what we got together and do what we need to do this day and in this time. And nobody told. That's the truth. And these men and women came when they initially came together. They were from different nations. They spoke different languages, but somehow they were able to figure out how to communicate and pull together so that we can go into that building even now and see the benches that they built. And we can see inscriptions in Arabic. We can see Akbar, God is great. Allah Akbar. You can see that written on the benches. It's there for anybody who cares to walk in and see it. And these people had to be versant in French, in English, in German, in Arabic. They had to be. Why? Because they came from all these different places. They were being sold. Germans would sell to English. English would sell to Spanish, French, and they had to speak all these languages. And they built this building. They built this escape route across the street from the auction block. What kind of nerve does it take to do that? And so when our youth ask questions like, what can we do? Or why didn't we do this? Or why we ain't never? No, then it's our responsibility to say, no, we have ever and always. It's just that part of our history has been covered up. It has been distorted. But the beautiful thing about history is you can't undo history. You can't undo what has happened. You can cover it up, you can put your spin on it, but what you cannot do with the people's history, what you cannot do with the people's culture, you cannot kill their culture. You kill them. It's the only way that you could kill African culture is to kill African people, because the culture is in me. There's something in me that no matter what I face today, someone like me has faced something even harder and found a good choice and followed through on it. I'm the evidence of that. We're the evidence of that. We're the evidence of that. We don't need money. We don't need faith. We don't need passion, because we got all of those things. We have those things. What we lack is organization. We lack a consistent, coherent way of deciding what is to be done and when it's to be done and who's going to do it. And the more we continue to work in ways like this, then we will find better ways to get things done on time and use what we have to produce excellent services and products for our people. There's a reason that people imitate African people. There's a reason if you go to China, if you go to Mumbai, if you go to Rio, people imitate African people. It is because of the wealth of our culture. We have been doing what we do as human beings for so long that we have forgotten many of the things that the rest of the world is yet to learn. The liberation and freedom of African people will be the liberation and freedom of the species. It is not African history. It is not even African culture. It is human history and human culture. Whatever has happened in the world for the past 6,000 years is a reflection of the culture of Africa and African people. Whatever has happened can be put within the context of the development and the evolution of African culture. So if we teach world history, it has to be African history. If a child in Beijing wants to understand how they came to be where they are in the world, they must start in Africa. If a child in Moscow wants to understand where they are in the world in 2020, they must start in Africa. It's world history. A child in Venezuela wants to understand how they got there. They have to start in Africa. And so when we focus on African history, when we focus on African culture, there is no other group of human beings on the planet who found out how to integrate ethnicities, integrate languages, integrate culture so that there's a continuity from Morocco to South Africa. There's a continuity in culture that has come about over tens of thousands of years of migration into migration and circling back again and going out and coming back and going out and coming back and going out and coming back again. So that anyone in China today, if they don't know the Shangs, if they don't know the Zhaos, they don't know Chinese history. It ain't a black thing. It's a human thing. If a child who lives in Mumbai does not understand the history of the Dravidians, they don't know Indian history. It's as simple as that. They simply don't know Indian history. And so our task today is to reconnect our children to a glorious past, to a culture that has a depth and a breadth, and now has the human capacity to transform the entire world. The youngest continent in the world is Africa. And we talk about Africa, Brother Chris, ain't about me or you. It's about our children and grandchildren. A black child who's 8 or 9 years old will becoming an adult when the major cohort of human beings in the world are Africans. So it just makes sense that a child of African descent in Savannah, Georgia, or New Orleans, or Rio, it just makes sense that those children understand the connection that they have to other children like them throughout the world. And that connection is African culture. It ain't just about slavery. It ain't just about what they did to us. It's about how do we work together. The organization that broke down between us when we were in Africa, that's something that we learned how to address. We may have come here, Akan and Twa and Ga and these, we came here that was part of the reason we came here, because these divisions existed. Our high level of organization was deteriorating at the same point that the level of organization in Western Europe was increasing. And it had to do with we hadn't yet worked out what to do. When I look at Kwaku and his cheekbones are not the same as mine. We had yet to work out that when I look at Brother Jamie and his forehead is not the same as mine. But as we sit here today and look at each other, that stuff is absurd. It's absurd. We are Black people. We are African people. We have a culture that's African. That's all of this, and it has come about as a result of our human struggle. We struggled to make who we are today. And so, as we return back to a place like Savannah, we left there all these different ethnicities, but we coming back as one people. And as we come back as one people, we bring millennia of culture along with us. And that is what's going to make a difference to the world. And that's what we want our children to understand.